من المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردنا الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها فأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعنب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. سورة فاتحة.
Mu'mineen, namaz time is at 8:16, so we can start moving towards that side. Just a caution for the ladies, the men are coming on that side. Bar Muhammad, Wale Muhammad, Salwat.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم. لا إله إلا الله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله رب السماوات السبع ورب الأرضين السبع وما فيهن وما بينهن ورب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده يا جليل ارحم عبدك الذليل اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وإيداء مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأجب. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ادخلنا في كل خير أدخلت فيه محمد وآل محمد وأخرجنا من كل سوء أخرجت منه محمد وآل محمد وصل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا ولي العافية نسألك اللهم العافية عافية الدين والدنيا والآخرة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا شديد القوى ويا شديد المحال يا عزيز يا عزيز يا عزيز ذلت بعتمتك جميع خلقك فاكفني شر خلقك يا محسن يا مجمل يا منعم يا مفضل يا لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم وكذلك ننجي المؤمنين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد الهادي والحسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسقري ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Just gonna quickly, Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Just for our brothers and sisters who don't speak Urdu or understand, just gonna do a quick translation for them so they can understand what's being recited. This marsiya is basically speaking to the land of Karbala as the Qafila returns back. It says, "Hey Karbala, you know, Shabir's sister is returning. Go hug her at her feet." This is talking about the Qafila that came back from prison. Ask them the difficulty that they've gone through. Hide that little grave of Asghar. How will you be able to tolerate the mother's pain? Don't look for Sakina on Abbas's grave. She stayed back in Sham, that Hussein's ladli. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. کربلا تعظیم کر آئی بہن شبیر کی جا کے قدموں سے لپٹ تو زینب دلگیر کی قبر سے بے سر بہتر تن اٹھے تعظیم کو دیکھ استقبال کو ہے فرات شمشیر کی قید سے چھٹ کر ہے آتا قافلہ زوار کا پوچھ لے ان سے ستم زندان کی جاگیر کا ارے ننسی تربت یہ اصغر کی چھپا لے کربلا کیا طرف نہ سن سکو گے مادر بے شیر کا مادر اکبر بھی آتی ہے کلیجہ تھام کر वो गिला किससे करे रूठी हुई तकदीर की। तुम सकीना को न ढूंढो तुरबते अब्बास पर रह गई है शाम में वो लाडली शबीर की। करबला ताज़ीम कर आई बहन शबीर की। जाके कदमों से लिपा तू ज़ैनबे दिलगीर की। मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम। Sheikh Bilal, Dr. Dungersi, respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Adamallah ajurna wa ajurakum. Tonight's program has been partially sponsored by family members of the Isa family for the Ithali Thawab of Marhum Saleh Isa, Marhuma Sakina Bai Isa, Marhum Habib Khalfan, Marhuma Zerha Bai Khalfan, Marhum Muhammad Dinani, Marhum Murtaza Jafar Bahosh, Marhuma Kulsum Bai Jafar, Marhum Muhammad Isa Isa, Marhum Abbas Isa, Marhum Askar Khalfan, all marhumins of Isa, Khalfan, Bahosh and Dinani families and all marhumins, as well as being partially sponsored by Dr. Ibrahim Isa for Marhum Saleh Bai Isa, Marhuma Sakina Bai Saleh Isa, Marhum Muhammad Fazal Lada Dinani, Marhuma Kulsum Bai Murtaza Jafar, Marhum Murtaza Bahosh, Marhum Askar Ahmad Khalfan, Marhum Muhammad Isa Saleh Isa, Marhum Abbas Saleh Isa, Marhuma Batul Bai Manji, all marhumins of Saleh Isa, Dinani, Khalfan, Manekia and Ashariya families and all marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Tonight was also partially sponsored by Rafiq Pir Muhammad for the Ithali Thawab of Marhuma Sugra Bai Abdullah Pir Muhammad, marhumins of Pir Muhammad, Versi, Dinani and Musa Jafar families, as well as marhumins of Juma and Hashim Nasir families. Al-Fatiha. Mu'mineen, I just wanted to remind you in regards to the Alamdar Fund that was created a few years ago as to provide support for families in the most dire of situations. Alhamdulillah, this fund has rescued families who are virtually in total despair and with nowhere to go. Many of these families have very young children as well, and this fund today continues to provide a lifeline to our community members on a monthly basis and who would otherwise not be able to make ends meet. Some are challenged to an extent they would not be able to go on in life without help. At the present time, we only have sufficient funds to meet our obligations for families in need for another 3 months. And as our President has messaged on our chat, we would like to take the opportunity in the name of Kamare Bani Hashim, or the moon of the family of Hashim, which was the name given to Hazrat Abbas, to make a donation toward this
important fund. No amount is big or small. And we're asking the community to do so before the nights of Ashari Zainabiyah, when we will all hear the cries for Abbas. Our target is $80,000, which will allow us to continue providing support for the next year. To donate, you can visit our website at sijni.org/donate. You can text donate to the number that's been sent in our newswire, or you can go on sijni.org/Muharram, or you can see our treasurers in the back. Lastly, let's recite 5 times Amma Yujib for all those who are sick here and around the world. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustaraiza da'u. Amma yujibul mustaraiza da'u wa yakshifusu. Amma yujibul mustaraiza. Amma yujibul mustaraiza da'u wa yakshifusu. Amma yujibul mustaraiza da'u wa yakshifusu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Please recite aloud salawat for Sheikh Bilal. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat as condolences to the master of our time, Sahibul Asri wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعظم الله أجورنا بذكرنا المسائب آل Muhammad. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of Ahlul Bayt. Tonight marks the night of the 7th of the month of Safar, which has a few different connotations to it. From one aspect, it is one of the dates associated with the shahadat of our second Imam. From others, it is associated with the wiladat of our 7th Imam. However, the significance of a date is attached by the fact that it gives us the opportunity to connect with a personality. And the ahmiyat of the opportunity to connect with our second Imam is something very important. Before we get into the detail, and there is a very important conversation about the second Imam that I want to have about some of the lessons that he's taught us that we should be implementing in our lives and to learn from his example. But before we begin that conversation is a discussion around the reality of what is imamat. And the significance of this conversation comes up in the fact that over the past few years, what's been happening in the Urdu-speaking community is that they have these talk shows in which they bring ulama in specific periods of time to present discussions, and they'll bring different schools of thought to try and normalize and humanize some of these relationships between the different sects of Islam. And a few years ago, they brought a Ja'fari madhab cleric and clerics from the other schools of thought, and they got into an argument. The argument was about what is the status of an imam. And a cleric of the Ja'fari school of thought said that an imam is higher in status than the anbiya. And those who don't believe in imams, they were honestly taken aback by this statement, and it was seen as almost as a tawheen of anbiya to make this statement. And while it's true that in our madhab we take this for granted and we say there is no one who is higher except for our Holy Prophet than the A'immah alayhimus salam, but there is an intellectual process by which we come to this conclusion. And part of the conversation is to kind of go through that conversation to explain that should you have that question or see that conflict, how do we mentally resolve that process intellectually to be satisfied and know that the A'immah have a higher status than the Anbiya, with the exception of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. To understand this, we begin with the concept of first asking the question, are all of the Anbiya the same? Meaning once you become a Nabi of Allah, and a Nabi of Allah is defined as someone who receives direct revelation from Allah through whichever means that Allah sends His revelation. Does that mean that there's equity amongst all of them? And we would know and we would say, no, there isn't, because we have something known as Ulul Azm, the greatest of the Anbiya, those are the highest of status. This, along with the reality that at the same point in time, there would be phases of this world where two or more Anbiya would exist simultaneously. And then when there would be two, there would be one who is the older one or the one in charge, for example, between Musa and Harun, between Ibrahim and Lut, between Dawood and Sulaiman. Between all of these Anbiya, there were Yaqub and Yusuf, and Benjamin after him, three being present at the same time. There would be rankings and differentiation amongst the Anbiya, meaning that just because someone is a Nabi and receives wahi of Allah, does not mean that they are all the same, but that there are differences in status and rank. And that the differences amongst the Anbiya are measurable in difference, which is why we say that some are known as Ulul Azam, some are known as Rasul, and some are known as Anbiya, to show that there's a difference in ranking. In a longer conversation, the ranking between Anbiya and A'immah and understanding the difference between this is something that people have delved a lot of time into to research and to present how to understand, respect, and take the wasila from these personalities. But what's interesting is, this is an aside for a second, that when it comes to the ladies in the history of the messengership and the history of A'immah alayhimus salam, there's no such ranking or elaboration done, other than the fact that there is no one higher than Sayyidatul Zahra salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. But amongst the women as well too, there is ranking, right? Allah speaks to the mother of Musa, Allah speaks to Bibi Maryam, Allah sends wahi and a book to Bibi Fatima. Say that Zainab has a high ranking amongst it, but there's no tamiz, there's no order amongst them. We haven't actually, no one has taken the time specifically to build out and explain and elaborate of how to understand the order of the women. But in terms of the Anbiya, this has been done. We know this, that those who are given books and those who are given suhuf, booklets, had a higher rank than those Anbiya who were sent to a smaller community. When you want to understand the difference amongst the Anbiya, the way that we know the difference amongst them is on the difference of the basis of their knowledge. That Allah defines and He explains that knowledge is the defining characteristic that explains the status of one versus the other, and there is differentiation, which is why that Nabi who would be given a book would be ranked higher than a Nabi who didn't, because the knowledge that he was given was more complete and more comprehensive. Which is why the verse that we begin our discussion with, Surah Al-Mujadila, the 58th chapter of the Holy Quran, in verse number 11, Allah makes a point and He says, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرٌ. In this verse, the 11th verse, Allah gives the elaboration. He says that Allah raises those who have faith amongst you and those who have knowledge levels, darajat, in reflection of the knowledge that you possess. And certainly Allah is well aware of what you do. And Allah is explaining the differentiation between one category and another is on the basis of the knowledge that they possess. Which is why we would say of all of the Anbiya, the one who is the most knowledgeable and the highest is our Prophet. Because he was the one who presented the completion of religion and all of the knowledge that humanity needed. When Allah makes a statement, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinukum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati, that today I have perfected your religion, means that the effort of all of the Anbiya is incorporated in the message of our Holy Prophet. And that our Prophet was the one who brought the completion of the message of every effort of every Prophet was completed in this book. So in comparison to our Prophet, to all of the other Anbiya, our Prophet is A'azam, which is why he is Habibullah, he's Rahmatul lil Alameen. He's the completion of faith. He is the one who presents the Quran to humanity and society because of that status. Step one, establish. This is more for me as for you to explain to you how we're going to do this. That there is a difference amongst the Anbiya, and that the difference amongst the Anbiya is on the basis of knowledge. The second question that comes is it possible for someone who is not a Nabi to be greater than a Nabi? To answer this, we can go simply back to the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, which we tafsir of in Shahr Ramadan. We discussed the story of Hazrat Nabi Musa and Hazrat Khizr, and that how Nabi Allah Musa, Kalimullah, the speech of Allah, the bringer of the Torah, he is educated by Khizr alayhi salam. And that Khizr possesses knowledge that Musa did not. And Khizr's knowledge was more complete than that of Musa. Remember the story, right? I'm sure many of us do, but for the kids, we'll repeat very, very quickly. That Musa becomes a companion of Hazrat Khizr, and they first go in a boat, and then after they ride in the boat, Khizr alayhi salam sinks the boat. They go into a village, they see kids playing, Khizr punches and kills a child. They go into another town, they see a wall falling down, Khizr fixes the wall. Musa, every step of the way, looks at the Sharia that he understands, and he says, Khizr, you did something wrong. He says, someone did you a kindness, and you sank his boat. The knowledge of Khizr was that if I didn't sink this boat, they were going to go through more difficulty. He goes to the second situation. Sharia forbids killing an innocent child. Khizr, you killed a child. Khizr says, Allah replaced him with one better and wanted to give him one who would be pious. Third one, he fixes a wall. Musa says, per the Sharia, if you do work, you're entitled to payment. You can seek payment. And Khizr says, here's where our situation ends. That the knowledge that Allah has given me is that this, under this wall, is the treasure that is the ownership of two orphans. And if this wall falls, it will be usurped from them and they will not be given their right. So Allah gave me instruction. So the knowledge of Khizr was something that Musa did not possess. But Musa is a Nabi. Khizr, if you remember the discussion on tafsir, Allah doesn't refer to Khizr as a prophet. He simply says this was one of our servants. The other element that we know that there is a status higher than a Nabi, and we've discussed this before as well too, but the point is valid, is that the description of our holy prophet before his nabuwwat comes the fact that he is Abdullah. When we recite in Salat and we go, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Meaning the risalat of our prophet, what's greater than that, the first thing that Allah describes him by is his abudiyat and servitude to Allah. That it is possible for one to be a servant. The right of being a servant in the eyes of Allah is more honorable than the mansib of risala, which tells us that it is possible for someone who is outside of nabuwwat or risala to have a greater status with Allah. Which is why the story of Khizr alayhi salam is an example of this, where someone who is outside of the rules of nabuwwat has knowledge that Allah has endowed him with to satisfy the needs of the people and to fulfill the ahkam of Allah on this earth. Which brings us to the aspect of the third part of this conversation, that can an imam, khususan our imams, be greater than these anbiya, with the exception of our prophet? And the answer is they have to be. Why? Because the completion of that message that was given to our holy prophet, an imam's job and imam's responsibility and purpose is to ensure that that message is preserved, protected, and taught and lived in this earth. And that message, we all collectively agree, that the message of our prophet is greater than the message of all of the anbiya. How can one enforce a message if they don't know the message in its entirety? The knowledge of the imam has to be complete, second only to the prophet, with the fundamental that he has to go and then preserve and protect the knowledge, the message of the prophet among society. Which is why our prophet would introduce Amir al-Mu'mineen by saying, Ana madinatul ilm wa aliyun babuha. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bringing this conversation through the structure of the intellectual proof, we have to say that if the message of the Prophet, if the job of the Imam is to ensure that people can enact and live the teachings of the Prophet, he has to understand and know the message of the Prophet completely. And no other Nabi had that message or that responsibility. So the knowledge that needs to be encompassed by the Imam has to be such that it encompasses what the Prophet taught and the ability to interpret and present it. So his knowledge has to be superior. Therefore, on the basis of knowledge, we would say that the possession of knowledge inquires and requires that the Imam has superiority. That doesn't mean that the unique status of the Anbiya of receiving wahi from Allah is neglected. No, that's a unique status that they possess, that as a Nabi of Allah, an Imam doesn't receive wahi and new ahkam and new revelation. No, that's the Anbiya who do that. We're not arguing to say that, that this status of the Prophet means that. No, it is a unique status. But it doesn't imply superiority. Shall I give you an example? All right, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Dying the death of a shaheed. There's no ghusl, no kafan. If someone dies as a shaheed, does it automatically make them superior to someone who doesn't die as a shaheed? Because then that would mean that Hamza was superior to Rasulullah. Rasulullah received ghusl and kafan. Sayyid al-Shuhada, Hamza didn't. His being shaheed is a unique status he possesses. It is honored. It is dignified. But it doesn't mean that he becomes greater than the Prophet. No, his azamat is tied to Rasulullah. He became a shaheed for the religion that Rasulullah brought. His status is unique. Same way the Anbiya's status is unique. They have very great honor in our eyes. But that doesn't make them superior. Their status is unique and this status is unique. This is dalil aqli. This is an intellectual proof of coming to the conclusion that it can happen that there is a difference between two things, but one does not imply the superiority to the other. Rather, we have to look at the facts behind it. There is also dalil naqli, where we can look at the riwayah and come to the conclusion that this is true. One of the famous riwayah on this is the riwayah of Sa'ab, where he explains the status of Imam Ali. But there is another one from our Holy Prophet that is actually hadith qudsi from Allah Himself, where our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells and says that Jibreel has revealed to me, Hadhan al-Hasanan, these two sons of mine, Sayyida Shabab Ahlil Jannah. They are the masters of the youth of paradise. Wa abuhuma afdalahuma, and their father is greater than them. If we understood this hadith, we have no problem with anything. Because let's explain it, let's elaborate it, right? Allah is dictating and explaining that Imam Hasan and Imam Hussain are the leaders of the youth of paradise. Everybody in heaven goes as a youth. No old people in heaven. No old people. Let's be clear about that. There's a hadith that says Fulan bin Fulan, Fulan bin Fulan are leaders of the old men in heaven. Sure, but there are no old men in heaven. You can call them whatever you want to. If those two are the leaders of the youth of paradise, and the Anbiya are in paradise, the Imams are in paradise, where in paradise? Inshallah. No, hang on. Where in paradise? Inshallah. Thank you. Don't make me nervous. Those two will be the leaders of all of society, and this is why the hadith continues and says, وَأَبُوهُمَا أَفْضَلَهُمَا, and their father is greater than the two of them. To explain the status and category that of all of humanity that will be present, these will be the leaders of all of humanity with the exception of Imam Ali, and then above Imam Ali is Rasulullah, who is exceptional beyond that point. But that all of society falls under their authority. This understanding that all of society, humanity, all of creation, everything that is created sits under the authority of these two Imams gives us an explanation of their status in terms of knowledge and position in comparison to the rest of humanity. Hands down, there's no question. Which is why, for us, this is a big majlis as well too. This shahadat is not one to be taken lightly. That this is my leader in heaven. This is the one who has been raised in status on the basis of knowledge and instruction above all of humanity. And this is why the Imam, because of this, we can now interpret how to look at an Imam. To know that he is the best of all of humanity and the highest in rank, we can now understand how to interpret and look at the Imam. One of the important things when we look at the Imam is to see that he is the best of humanity. If he's the best of humanity in heaven, and heaven contains the best of humanity and he's the best of them, that means in this earth there is no one better than him. The Imam is the best example. And that's part of the definition of the word Imam. An Imam is a leader. You don't follow someone who's less than you. One of the important elements to always understand is that the perfect example has to be the Imam in every element and aspect. If anyone is better than him, he's not my Imam. It's not possible. Because that implies that someone else should be the Imam. He can be an Imam in a subject, but he can't be an Imam in everything because someone is better than him. It has to be that an Imam is the perfect example in every single element. Which is why, now understanding the statement, what is the role of an Imam as being the best, and he has to be the best in humanity, and he's the leader of humanity in everything, and he presents the perfect example of everything that goes on, we see how oppressed our second Imam, Hasan ibn Ali al-Mujtaba, was in his life. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We'll present two examples of this, and we'll move on to lessons from the life of the Imam. I don't intend to take too much of our time, but these are important points of our opportunity to connect with our Imam, to understand his fadilat and his status. Everybody's okay? Everybody's all right? The first of these is the false narrations attributed to the Imam that he was someone who was mitlaq, who took a lot of divorces. And it's narrated and said falsely that Imam Ali used to tell people, don't marry your women to my son because he divorces quickly. And this false narration was given about the Imam. Upon its face, we immediately have to cast it out and throw it away, because it goes against the definition of what is an Imam. It implies that an Imam has a deficiency in his character, that somebody else would be better than Imam Hasan. And if that's the case, then he can't be an Imam, because an Imam has to be the best in every environment. So we know that this is false. Then when you research this, you find out and you realize that this was a fallacy attributed to Imam Hasan to discredit his generations and his children. After the fall of Banu Umayyah, the children of Imam Hasan and the children of Abbas, the uncle of the Holy Prophet, got together and decided to overthrow the Banu Umayyah. When they succeeded in overthrowing the Banu Umayyah, the initial intention was that the children of Imam Hasan would be given authority. But then the children of Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, kind of said, maybe not. We change our mind. And this is how the Abbasid Empire began, by the persecution of the children of Imam Hasan. Now these two both had been fighting against the Banu Umayyah by saying that we are the Banu Hashim, we are more worthy of authority than anyone else. So now between the Banu Hashim, you had the children of Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib and the children of Imam Hasan ibn Ali. These had to somehow demonstrate and say that we are the better piece of the Banu Hashim and we deserve authority more than these do. So they attributed fallacies and lies to the character of Imam Hasan and did character assassination to reduce the status of these and promote their cause and their flag over the others to show why we deserve to have authority. This was the beginning of the persecution of the children of Imam Hasan under the Abbasids. And they did it first by doing character assassination of Imam Hasan. The reason this fallacy exists, that, Imam Hasan was someone who divorced many women. First off, they attribute and say that he divorced over 70 women. They can't find more than 10 women who have any connection to the Imam, and not all of them were even described as his wives. So they came up with this artificial number and made this entire story up to somehow discredit and say that that lineage is less pure, is less worthy of authority than us, the children of the uncle. And in this way we saw that as soon as we hear a statement like that questions the character of an Imam, we can throw it out, and when we research it we find it was created with a political agenda behind it. The other character assassination of our Imam that takes place is something which is worse in the element that sometimes we ourselves are guilty of this character assassination, which is the character assassination around the Imam in considering him to be someone who was docile and was not courageous. And this is said and explained to say that yes, Imam Hasan was someone who could not stand the case of war, therefore he made peace. And Imam Hussain had to stand up, and he was the one who was willing to stand up and defend. Or that we internally kind of take a look at these two biographies and we imagine there's a comparison between the two and say this one is braver and this one is less. This is completely wrong. First and foremost, to understand how this is wrong is you have to take a look and see what is bravery and courage as a definition. And understand, what does bravery and courage mean? Linguistically, bravery is not necessarily tied to standing in the battlefield and standing with a sword in your hand. Rather, bravery is to overcome the obstacle and difficulty in front of you, whichever realm it may appear in. When we look at this, for example, even in a spiritual level, the characteristic of bravery is not the presence or absence of a feature within a human being. Rather, bravery is the balance of character within a human being. Because when it reduces, it becomes cowardice. When it increases too much, it becomes foolhardy, throwing away your life. But rather, bravery is the aspect of showing balance in the face of these two extremes that exist. The same way intellect, that having too much or abusive intellect or not balancing your intellect correctly makes you someone who is sly and wicked because you're too smart, so you trick other people in that process. And not having enough of intelligence makes you someone who is foolish and makes mistakes and doesn't know the reality and balance in life. When we look at the attribute of courage and bravery, and we see that it is a balance between being foolhardy and being cowardice, we understand that not every situation will bravery be standing with the sword. Rather, every time if you stand with the sword, you'll be foolhardy. And every time if you avoid the sword, you'll be a coward. Bravery, true bravery, is standing in the right moment at the right time to make the right action that completes the goal in a perfect fashion and does not sacrifice anything. And this is what we found in the character of Imam Hasan. That he was not foolhardy. He knew better that this was not the time to stand, and which is why one of the poetic statements is that the Ma'rakat of Hussain, the battle of Hussain, is really the completion of the will of Imam Hasan. That it was what Imam Hasan laid out, and Imam Hasan prepared for this moment to be the exact moment to demonstrate bravery. That every right and justification is given to Abu Abdullah, and even anyone who reads the history of the event of Karbala cannot argue to say that Imam Hussain was wrong to stand up in this situation. Rather, everyone will say that he was perfectly right and there is no mistake. There is no cowardice in the movement of Imam Hussain, nor is there any foolhardiness in the movement of Imam Hussain, but that it is perfection and balance. That establishment of that moment came because of the bravery and the attribute of Imam Hasan knowing when to stand and fight and when not to stand and fight. Which is why understanding this and knowing that should anyone ever accuse an imam of such a status, the bravery of every imam was perfect. You cannot make a comparison, say that this imam was more brave than that one, this one was more this than that one, this one was more pious than... No, each one reflects every element in perfection such that they are all the one and the same, and that they represent the same message in perfection in every element. أولنا محمد آخرنا محمد أوسطنا محمد كلنا محمد صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. The reflection of these attributes is based upon the condition and the environment that they were in, not the fact that they possessed the attribute or if it was absent. We've already agreed, for an imam to be an imam, he has to be perfect in every element. But that doesn't mean the action has to be same. Because every action has to be based upon the perfection of the attribute that the imam possesses. This is why these are important elements to understand when we think about the concept of imamah, the proof of what is an imam. There can never be a question in his attribute. Which is why from the one aspect we can understand an inappropriate comment that is made about the imam has to be false. But the other side of this coin is that if the imam possesses a perfection, if the imam possesses a lesson that he teaches us, it's perfect. It is beyond perfect. And no one can enact the lesson of the imam the way the imam does. And we'll mention two of these with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You guys aren't tired yet, are you? Not yet? Give me a little bit of time, I'm almost done. But it's important. One is the aspect of generosity. Mujtaba is the one who is generous. The generosity of the imam is unlike anything else. No one can be generous the way our imam is generous. Whether it's the fact that Imam Hasan himself has given away half of his wealth to the exact perfection more than once in his life, to where he would literally take, if he had 2 shoes and he says, I am giving half of what I possess in the way of Allah, he would give 1 shoe that he would be wearing in the way of Allah to say that exactly half of what I possess I have given in the way of Allah. But this is incomplete. There are other examples of his generosity, for example, where we say that he was sitting and he was eating and a dog was coming and he gave the dog food as he was eating. A dog, najis, haram. One of the companions comes and he says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, shall I take this animal away from you? Is it disturbing you? Imam Hasan replies, he says, I am embarrassed that the creation of Allah should look at me with hunger and I have the ability to meet its need, and I don't. So what he would do is he would eat himself, and as he would eat 1 bite, he would give to the creation of Allah. Lo it be a dog. This doesn't encompass his generosity either. The perfection and the beauty of his generosity is still in another example. It happens that one day Imam Hasan is sitting in the masjid and a man comes and he calls out, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, I am under attack from my enemy, assist me, my enemy attacks me. The ghira, the honor of the Arab is that should someone call for assistance, you offer them assistance. So Imam Hasan immediately replies, he says, who is your enemy and I shall assist you against him? The man replies, he says, Al-Faqr, poverty is my enemy, and poverty is attacking me, and it continues to attack me. Imam Hasan puts his head down for a minute, and then he calls to his servant and he says, bring that amount of money. And the servant brings 500 dirhams, 5,000 dirhams. And the Imam hands the man 5,000 dirhams. It goes further. He then turns to the man and he says, take this amount as a protection from your enemy. Should he ever attack you again, come and I will assist you against your enemy again. You see, a generous person, someone says, I'm in need. You can say, okay, fine, here, take this. A generous person who goes beyond gives and then says, let me help you understand how to fix your problem so that you don't wind up in this situation again. But who amongst us has the generosity that without asking, questioning, debating, I gave you money, what did you do with it? Are you being wise with your money? Why are you constantly in a state of poverty? Can simply say that anytime you're in a state of difficulty, come and I will give you. It's the perfection of the example of generosity. That he gave for the sake of Allah, and he didn't look at it as now you have accountability to me. He gave it and he says, if you need again and you give me another opportunity, I will give again. Without asking. Why? How? What did you do? Where did it go? Who amongst us can possess such perfect example of generosity? Any one of us. Asked once, we'll give. Asked twice, we'll be like, this guy's scamming me. This guy's taking me for a ride. He's taking advantage of my generosity. He's taking advantage of my good nature. But I gave him one so he thinks he has an open checkbook in front of him. But look at the example of that Imam in his generosity. His acknowledgement and recognition that it's not this person that I'm giving to, but rather it's the attribute that I'm giving in the way of Allah. And if anyone gives me an opportunity to give in the way of Allah, I should take that opportunity. The second of these examples, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. From amongst the fadail of Imam Hasan is that he is one who is known to have gone to Hajj 20 times in his life. Hafiyan, walking. And if you were to question the fact that 20 times walking, does that mean that, when he gave away his wealth, he gave away half of his horse too, so he didn't have a way to go? No. The Imam, whenever he would go to Hajj, would go with a caravan with him of resources, but he himself would not sit on a horse when he walked to the house of Allah. When he would be going to Hajj, it was always walking. To the extent where it would be seen that him and Imam Hussain would be walking to Karbala, and people would be riding on the same path. And they would see the Imams and become embarrassed that we're riding and the grandsons of the Prophet are walking, so they would walk. Until eventually it became so hard that the people couldn't walk anymore, and they were getting frustrated that the Imam walks, so we walk. So they appointed Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who was one of the old guys, to go to the Imam and say, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, people can't walk with you, it's too hard for them. Why don't you ride so that they can ride too? Imam Hasan replies and he says, I understand it's hard for them, but my intention is not to ride. So instead of me giving them in difficulty, I will elect another path and move away from the road so that they don't have to go through this difficulty. This description of the Imam walking to Hajj 20 times is something really important to pay attention to, because everything the Imam does is perfect. What is the Imam teaching us in this? See, many of us are satisfied we did a good deed. We did what was wajib. And we're satisfied with this. And we say, Allah gave me a checklist of things I need to do. Tick, 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 all done. I've completed my obligations. The Imam's attribute is not to look at an act of ibadat as an obligation he has to satisfy. The Imam takes a look at this ibadat as a way of demonstrating his love for Allah. And what can I do extra in this ibadat to show Allah I really love Him? Hajj itself is fantastic. It's a beautiful thing. This is the authority of Allah on this earth. He's teaching us, go to Hajj. Not once, not twice. As much as you can. But then within that, He's showing sacrifice on your way to Allah. Go to Allah in a way that shows that you are exerting your effort for His sake. To go to Allah in such a way that you are willing to take whatever you possess and dedicate it to the cause of Allah. For example, we may pray. Many times we're more interested in how do I make this prayer shorter. Sheikh, what are the exact words I have to say to make sure my prayer is complete? I've had that conversation more than once. Even if we think about lengthening our ibadah, we think about lengthening it in reasonable ways. A little bit longer, not too much longer. Sheikh, don't take too long. But look at the beauty of the one who dedicates himself to the cause of Allah, wants to exert his effort. If you and I today were to think, how do I extend my prayer to show worship to Allah? We'd go to sujood. Spend time in sujood. Sujood, there are 7 points touching the ground. You might even fall asleep. Have you ever thought about lengthening your ruku? Where it's your 2 feet. And you're bent in the worship of Allah. And your entire attribute at that moment is the most uncomfortable position in salat that you can have. And for the sake of Allah, I lengthen it. I lengthen it. Our ulama used to be such that they would start the night in ruku, and in Fajr you would see them still in the same ruku that they were in when they started the night. The idea was learn from the Imam. Do the ibadat and make it such an ibadat that from what my character, what I possess, my milkiyah, what Allah has given me, from that I will exert an effort that shows my unique love for Allah. This is why the 20 Hajj of Imam Hasan you can't compare with. You can't. No one can. We may do 20 Hajj. We may do 25. But the thought would never enter our mind that make each of these Hajj so difficult that only I can exert myself to complete it. The others can't even match my example. Which is why Imam Hasan's words, he says, I will move away from the path so that it's not difficult for them, but I will not change my love and my action in acting the teachings for Allah. Which of our ibadat do we do that in? The example of the Imam doing this was so much so that think about it. The long hot days of the summer, when Ramadan comes, we say, Alhamdulillah, those days are gone. Have we ever thought about the longest day of the year? It's one of the things I like to think about. The longest day of the year, I want to spend in fasting for Allah. That Allah, this is the longest day that you gave me, I give this day back to you. Instead, and I do this myself as well too, is I'd rather fast the shortest day of the year. Allah, the shortest day of the year you gave me, I'd rather fast now. Our nature is to want to make it easy. We have a nature for this, but when we start to think about who we're worshipping and what is the example that the Ahlul Bayt are teaching us, the example of the Ahlul Bayt is to exert yourself. Now understand that how severe and wicked was that wife of Imam Hasan. Why it was that his example had to be, and this candle had to be extinguished. Because this example of showing this beauty and perfection and love of Allah was changing Arabia, though they had taken away the position of Khilafat from him. So they intended then to put out and snuff out this candle. So they engaged with his wife in a false contract, whose family history, if you look at, is one of darkness against the Ahlul Bayt. Let's poison him and we will give you an amount of wealth and marry you to the son of the Khalifa. Ju'da, the evil that she possessed, on the hottest of days, when my Imam has been fasting the entirety of the day, and he comes to open that fast in the state of heat and difficulty, the first thing that he tastes is a poison. That Ju'da poisons that exact item that was used for futur, for iftar of Imam Hasan. And Imam Hasan immediately feels the burning of the poison within his chest, and he knows of this difficulty that has befallen him. Remember something, this was not the first time Imam Hasan was poisoned. My Imam was poisoned 6 times. But when the first 5 failed, they went in search of the most vile and difficult and painful of poisons that they could find. And that Mal'oon took a poison from the Romans that went and caused such pain and difficulty for the Imam, that the Imam did not suffer for 1 day or 2 days. The least that is written in many riwayat is my Imam suffered the effects of this poison for a period of 40 days. And that during these 40 days, the poison kept eating away at him until eventually when the time of his shahadat comes, they say we would look at Hassan ibn Ali and his color had turned green from the effect of this poison in his body. They describe in that final day that Abu Abdullah was called to the side of his brother. Imam Hasan says, "Oh my brother, hold me to your chest, lift me up." Abu Abdullah would hold his brother to his chest, and then Imam Hasan would say, "Oh Hussain, bring for me the tasht, bring for me the tray and the bowl." When it would be brought, he would see that Imam Hasan would then vomit into the bowl. But it was not food that was vomited. Rather, they would say, "We saw the lifeblood of Hassan ibn Ali coming out of him from the effects of this poison into the bowl." Abu Abdullah, seeing the condition of his brother, begins to weep and see that his brother is losing his life in this way. Imam Hasan says, "Mada yubkik, what made you cry, O my brother?" Imam Hussain says, "How can one look upon his brother and not cry at this condition?" Imam Hasan begins to weep and he says, "Oh Hussain, I have the right to cry upon you, that I see that day when you will be alone, when you will be by the side of the Furat, and there will be no one to hug you to their chest but Mal'un Shim." As the 2 brothers cry over the masa'ib of one another, they hear a knock upon the door. They ask, "Who has come to visit us?" The same way Fatima to Zahra asked when she sat by Rasulullah. This time though it was Zainab who comes to the door. Imam Hasan says, "Oh Hussein, cover the bowl." Abu Abdullah moves the bowl to the corner of the room, lays a cover upon it. Sayyidah Zainab is the sister of Ismat, sister of Imamat. She steps into the room, immediately looks and sees the bowl. She goes and uncovers it and finds within it the blood of her brother. But this is not the only blood that she will witness, not the only bowl that she will witness. In Tariq you will see this is the first. The second, which was more azim and difficult, that when they entered into the court of Yazid in Sham, there's a description that says that Yazid took the women and put them behind his throne, and then called for the men, called for Imam Zainul Abidin, and called for the head of Abu Abdullah in a bowl. The women from behind the throne could not see. They said, "We heard someone striking a stick on something." Sayyidah Zainab, becoming concerned, says to the daughter of Imam Hussain, "Look and see, is your brother Zainul Abidin being struck that I should defend him?" They describe and say this daughter of Abu Abdullah stands up and immediately collapses. The aunt says, "What did you see?" She says, "Auntie, look for yourself." Sayyidah Zainab looks over the throne, sees the Mal'oon with the head of Abu Abdullah in a bowl, striking the lips and teeth of Imam Hussain. So witnesses Zainab this masa'ib twice in her life. They describe and say Imam Hasan in this condition, with his brother and sister near him. The sweat of death overcame his brow. His eyes began to close. His breathing became shallow. His hands and feet moved until the poet describes, "The light of Imamat left my Imam. His soul left his body. The son of Ali was killed by poison." if the Masayib of Imam Hussain, Imam Hasan would end in this moment. But they say no, this is not the only Masayib of this Imam, but rather if Hussain and Hasan are the leaders of the youth of paradise, then their Masayib have similitude. There is one who writes and says that it was Hussain who was desecrated in the field of Karbala after his death. Look in Medina and you will see that they brought the janazah of Imam Hasan, wanting to bury it next to the grave of Rasulullah. But the enemy stood and said, you refuse to bury such and such enemy of Allah next to the Prophet. We will not let you bury the grandson of the Prophet next to him. They shot arrows at the body of Imam Hasan. Imam Hasan's body was desecrated in front of the grave of his grandfather. They removed the arrows. They took him to Baqi, opened a grave next to his grandmother Fatima bint Asad. There is one riwayah that is enough for us to cry. It says that Imam Hussain with his hands lowered the body of his brother into the grave. Who was the one there to assist you, O Hussain? When the grave was closed, the grief of Imam Hussain on his brother was such. They write and say, we saw Hussain ibn Ali take the turban from his head, throw it upon the grave of his brother, and weep over the loss of Hassan ibn Ali.
ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. ماتم حسين.
جودائے ملعون نے زہر ہلاہل دیا زہر سے مارا گیا آتا ہے تابوت یہ مروان ملعون نے تیروں کی بارش کیا تیروں سے چدا گیا آتا ہے تابوت یہ فوج ملک ساتھ ہے سر کھلے جبریل ہے شور یہی ہے بپا آتا ہے تابوت یہ زینب مغموم بھی روتی ہے سر پیٹتی ماتم و گل ہے بپا آتا ہے تابوت خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن دیکھو میرا رنجو مہن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن سب جان کھوتے ہیں اٹھو شبیر روتے ہیں اٹھو ہے جا بلب ہم سے بہن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی خوبی ہے یہ تقدیر کی رونے کو میں جیتی رہی سوتے ہو تم پہنے کفن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن زہرا کی گودی کے پلے مرکد میں سونے کو چلے اے مصطفیٰ کے جان و تن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن کیسا وہ قاتل زہر تھا کیسا غضب یہ ہو گیا نیلا ہے گل سایے بدن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی اماں موئی نانا موئے بابا موئے اور تم چلے اب کیا کرے جی کے بہن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن محمد و آل محمد صلوات زیارت توجہ زیارت انکل ابراہیم تفضل
السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا حسن الله لك العزاء في ولدك الحسن عليه السلام السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب أحسن الله لك العزاء في ولدك الحسن عليه السلام السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين أحسن الله لك العزاء في ولدك الحسن عليه السلام السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين والمؤمنات أحسن الله لك العزاء في ولدك الحسن عليه السلام زيارة إمام حسن عليه السلام السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله رب العالمين السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا حبيب الله السلام عليك يا صفة الله السلام عليك يا أمين الله السلام عليك يا حجة الله السلام عليك يا نور الله السلام عليك يا صراط الله السلام عليك يا بيان حكم الله السلام عليك يا ناصر دين الله السلام عليك أيها السيد الزكي، السلام عليك أيها البر الوفي، السلام عليك أيها القائم الأمين، السلام عليك أيها العالم بالتعويل، السلام عليك أيها الهادي المهدي، السلام عليك أيها الطاهر الزكي، السلام عليك أيها التقي النقي، السلام عليك أيها الحق الحقيق، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد الصديق، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن بن علي ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليكم جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. All together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي مولاي أبو الفضل العباس وأختك زينب كلثوم وبنتك سكينة وقاسم بن الحسن ومسلم بن أكيل وهاني بن أروى وحبيب بن مظاهر والحر الشهيد الرياحي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر، السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق، السلام عليك يا موسى الكاظم، السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا، السلام عليك يا محمد التقي الجواد، السلام عليك يا علي النكي، السلام عليك يا حسن الأصغري، السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله فرجك وسخر الله مخرجك ورزقني الله في الدنيا زيارتك وفي الآخرة شفاعتك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائك في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توا وتمتئه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين مع الصلوات.